So what is an authentic life? How do we go about finding it?
I have grown to believe that we were all created for a purpose, that we were given unique gifts and talents that we're supposed to bring to the world. And that ends up coming through the work that we do most of the time, our careers, our jobs, hobbies, things of that sort. So to me, the authentic life is most simple. It was a life that you were created to live and bring to the world. And it's inside of us. If you do a deep dive and you get to connecting to your inner self, you will find out what that is. But as we go through life, there are signs and communications that are kind of directing you if you're open to it. And the one that I spoke about the most when I started going down this path was passions. I think that our passions maybe are supposed to be our career, maybe are supposed to be a hobby, they're supposed to be a part of our life, but also sometimes our passions lead us down a path that lead us to the thing that we're really supposed to do. So, for example, I think my purpose really is this idea of the authentic life and helping people find it and bring it to them. But my passion of content creation is what led me there. So I think passions are one way to find it. But what I've grown to learn, again, through my experience, is finding your authentic life. The cheat code that I believe is there is finding an alignment of your spirit, mind, and body. And I talk about the alignment of spirit, mind, body, and money because I do work in finance and money touches everything, as we talked about before. But I intentionally put money at the very end because I think when you align spirit, mind, and body, money falls into place.
Welcome to Talking Billions. We talk about big ideas, big inspirations, big topics. We take on the hardest topic of all, money. How to make it, save it, keep it. But our conversations lead us to an even bigger question, what it means to live a rich life beyond money. My guests share their practices, principles, and evergreen wisdom. I'm your host, Bogumil Baranowski, author, TEDx speaker, and investment advisor to wealth creators with patient capital and an infinite investment horizon. I work with families and individuals who aspire to grow wealth over a lifetime and generations through disciplined, thoughtful investments in durable quality businesses while giving money meaning. Join me on this quest to unearth and share the wisdom of the ages. Let me share with you the podcast program disclosure statement. Blue Infinitas Capital LLC is a registered investment advisor, and the opinions expressed by the firm's employees and podcast guests on the show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Blue Infinitas Capital. All the statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. The information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. The information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance. None of what you're about to hear is investment advice. My guest today is Justin Castelli, and in the spirit of keeping those introductions short, I'm going to try to share with you in a sentence the essence of Justin Castelli, the way I got to know him, and he can tell me in a minute if I'm right or wrong. So he's interested in helping others on their money and wealth journey. He's passionate about creative expression and curious about what it takes to live an authentic life. Am I onto something, Justin?
I think the only thing you left off was being a father and a husband.
Being a father and a husband.
Like the personal side of things, but everything else was spot on, which makes me happy because you never know how people perceive you and what they think about you. And to hear you recite back the things that are important to me means that I'm doing something right with my messaging and storytelling. So I thought that was awesome. So thank you for sharing that. That was great to hear.
Well, I think you're doing a terrific job, and we'll talk more about it. How your personal brand, your communication, I think you have a gift, but I think there's a lot of effort, thought, and deliberate action behind it too. And that's why I think it resonates with people. And that's why it's so clear in my mind. And I know that there are layers to every individual. So I think it's unfair to keep it to a sentence. But I think if I had to, this would be the sentence. I want to bring up Matt Ziegler because he's the one that connected us. So Matt, thank you for making this happen. And Matt is such a wonderful human being. I don't know, like the energy and everything about him. Like we spoke the other day about, I don't even know what the topic was, Matt, but he's just a joy to be around. And I know that you had a fun conversation with Matt not long ago.
Yes. And I get to have fun conversations with him just like as friends on the phone periodically. So I wrote a post a little while ago about people I would buy stock in. And like Matt is somebody I would buy stock in if I could. He's an amazing human being, very genuine. And also like what he's doing right now as far as a creator is amazing. I don't think very many people are able to do what he does the way he does it, which is very much along the lines of what I think the authentic life is all about, which we'll get to in a little bit. So hopefully we're making Matt blush a little bit as he listens to this.
I hope so. But anybody looking for Matt, they have to look up Cultish Creative. And he's writing over there. He writes every day. I don't know how he finds time. And then he has 2 podcasts, The Intentional Investor and Just Press Record. And I know he's having a lot of fun with it. So in the spirit of having fun, let's have some fun today. Justin, I want to ask you a question that I kind of asked you last time we spoke, but I really want to dive in. I want to ask you about the early days, about your childhood upbringing, and how do you think that time shaped you, your relationship with money, and the career path that you chose, or maybe the path chose you. You can tell me.
Yeah, I love that you asked that question because unlike my wife has she's a very visual person and she has a memory where she can just remember every detail growing up. And it's not that I don't have a lot of memories growing up, but I don't really tend to live in the past. So hearing that you asked this question and assuming you're going to ask that to me as well, I really thought about it. So when I think about my childhood, the things that I think about are love. I think about my family. My family was small. It was my mom, dad, and my sister, Kristen. All of my extended family was in Western Pennsylvania where my parents are from. So we were a very, very close unit. And we spent pretty much all of our time together. Weren't the parents that were out every weekend with friends. Like we did everything together as a family. So I think about the love. I think about the time together as a family, how close we were. There was a lot of basketball. That was my first love. So from like the age of 2 all the way through college, I played basketball. And living in Indiana, that's not a huge surprise, but a lot of time spent in the gym, a lot of time spent with my dad at the YMCA. My mom worked at the YMCA. So those are the things I think about. There's, vacations and trips and things that happened to as a family. But when I think about my childhood, those are the things I think about the most. And as far as like how it shaped me on money, I think for the time, and even today, I think we were a pretty open family when it came to finances. Mm-hmm. And the thing that sticks out the most to me, and I do think it paved the way for me going forward, is I always remember my dad telling me to pay yourself first. He would always say, pay yourself first, pay yourself first. I remember conversations about, salary and income. And I remember when he made it, his salary was $100,000 for the first time. That was a big deal. So I remember those conversations, which at the time didn't make me really interested in money. I just remember we had those conversations. There's nothing in my childhood that would have made you think I would be sitting where I am sitting today. So to answer your question, the career path chose me. I went to a small Division III liberal arts school to play basketball in Franklin, Indiana. It was Franklin College. I thought I was going to go to law school, so I majored in econ, minored in political science. And then I met my wife going into my senior year and realized that, I didn't want to go to school for 3 more years. She was really special. So I didn't really know what I was going to do. So I graduated without a plan, which I look back and I'm just like, I'm so lucky because I could have fallen down a path of not knowing what I'm supposed to do, working in jobs that didn't fulfill me and kept me kind of boxed in and had a ceiling over me and just been unhappy. Mm-hmm. But everything worked out. And it's funny because at a liberal arts school, like you have classes across the board. And I had one finance class and I took it in the summer. And I got a C in it. Had no interest in it. I remember we were supposed to read the Wall Street Journal and find articles that didn't excite me. I got through the class because I had to, not because I enjoyed it. So to sit here as a financial advisor turned into a life planner of doing this work for 20 years, there's nothing that would have said he's going to go into finance, and that's going to be where his career is. But what I realized, and you asked me a question when we spoke last time, why finance?
Mm-hmm.
And I think first off, the career path chose me. I networked, found my way into financial planning, and it was probably 4 or 5 years before I fell in love with the profession. But the reason finance and the reason it chose me is I think that was the path to lead me to finding my inner creator, becoming an entrepreneur, being comfortable exploring and experimenting and wandering around, which is ultimately what led me to finding this idea of an authentic life and wanting to help people find theirs. And I mean, maybe a different path would have got me there, but I think I had to go into finance. I had to turn into an entrepreneur. I had to have an angle to be able to help people, and money is kind of my angle because of my expertise. But I don't think I get to this point if I'm not in the world of finance and not a financial advisor. So looking back, it all makes sense. But if we were to go back 30 years, we would have never guessed that this is where I'd be sitting. And I'd be sitting here talking to you on Talking Billions. That would have never been the guess.
So life can surprise you in many ways.
Yes.
I want to ask a question that just popped in my head, and I'm trying to picture Justin at 7. And if money was a topic that came up at a table, at a dinner table, what kind of emotions would it bring up? In you specifically.
7? I don't think any.
Any? Okay.
No, I mean, I remember saving money, getting money for Christmas, but it was not anything that really excited me. I have no negative feelings around it. Growing up, we did well. I would say we were middle class. We didn't want for anything, but we also didn't have everything. So I don't ever remember hearing my parents stress about money or see them stress about money.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was any emotion, it would be a neutral or slightly positive, but it wasn't a negative experience with money growing up.
Not something you worried about.
No. And maybe that follows me today because money is something I try not to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fortunate to be able to sit and be in a position to not worry about it. But as I was going and progressing in my career, I never wanted to make money the focus of what it was that I did. My thought was if I do the right things and take care of people, money will take care of itself. And we'll just kind of figure our way through things. I was always afraid to make money a big focus. So that might go back to the fact that it wasn't a big, even though we talked about it, it wasn't a big stressor. It wasn't a big goal of ours that we knew of. So it was never too important to me other than I know we have to have it and it helps provide for a good life. And maybe that kind of followed through to my fear of making money too important. But I know there's a money story attached to that I've kind of broken down since, which I could share if you want me to.
Tell me. Yes, I want to hear it.
So the money story that I realized that was semi-connected or connected to that fear of making money too important was that the story of being greedy, that wanting to make more money made you greedy, and that was a bad thing. So I was always afraid that if I set goals to make more money, that was a sign of greed and that God or the universe would, punish me for that. So just take care of people, do the right thing, and money will take care of itself. And it always has. But I'd say in the last couple of years, I've realized that it's not a bad thing to want more money if the motivation and the intention behind it is good. My desire to increase my income is not to have more nice things and flashy things. Like, we live a good life. The reason I want more money is to invest in people, to help people, to give it away. Like, I want to do good things with it. And once I accepted that my motivations were pure and good, then it's like try to go make as much money as possible, because the more money I have, the more good I can do. And it's not necessarily a bad thing to want more money. I'm sure there's connections back to my childhood that if I did like some shadow work and some deep dives, it would connect even more.
Mm-hmm.
But that has kind of been how I've viewed money, and then recently kind of given myself permission to be more focused on how can I increase my income to go do more good things.
It's very empowering. I like the sound of that. People come to you and ask for help, and they have money worries and they have money concerns. And I'm very curious, and maybe it's a good way to frame it. How would you describe the biggest value that you add to your clients' life and journey?
I hope the biggest value that I add is peace of mind. It's being able to work with them and talk to them and show them that they're okay and those fears aren't needed, and that, if it's a market related fear, markets do these crazy things, we have a game plan, you're okay. But I hope that's what my value has been kind of up until the last couple of years. What I hope my value becomes going forward is more of, I'll say, providing freedom, which is a very heavy thing to say. And who am I to give some people freedom? But what I mean by that is I want to help people find their own freedom. And I think a lot of people are living lives that they might not choose for themselves, or they would go back and rewrite, or they're just not happy, which ties into the authentic life. So I hope my value becomes more through the conversations around money or the work that I'm doing in life planning. The value is I help my clients, or I help you find your true authentic self. And if you find your authentic self, the person you were supposed to be, then that opens up freedom, because now you can go pursue the things that make you the happiest, allow you to be the best version of yourself. And I think the dominoes move in the direction that makes the life that you want it to be. So I hope it's been peace of mind, but I hope going forward it's freedom and giving people the opportunity to go chase the life they feel like they're supposed to live. And then in that, there's a money component. Like, all right, now we know what the life is you want to live. How do we make the finances work to allow you to do that?
As I'm listening to you, I was thinking of Ken Honda, who wrote Happy Money. We might have talked about it. I shared with you at some point. He was on the show, and he has this idea that money can be happy or not. And he grew up in a household with an accountant, a tax accountant, I believe, and his father would have different clients come in. And Ken shared with me how people with money would come every year to pay taxes or file their returns. He said the ones that were unhappy the year before, they had more money the following year, and they were equally unhappy. And the ones that were happy last year, they were happy this year. And he kind of started to realize, what's the source? And he tells this story how in his life he has friends that have almost nothing, live super simple life, and they're very happy. And he has friends that seem to have everything, and they're still unhappy. And I think it links back and bridges it with the authentic life, that money is a tool. And it's a means to an end. But I think there's a bigger question that needs to be asked. And I think that's the question you're asking with the pursuit of authentic life. So what is an authentic life? How do we go about finding it?
I'll answer that in a second. But as you were talking, this is why I love podcasts. As you were talking, new thoughts came. What you just described about the people with all the money being unhappy and those without makes us think that money doesn't buy happiness.
Right.
And I don't necessarily believe that to be true. But what I think the way money brings happiness is when money is aligned with your values and who you are and what's most important to you. And in that alignment, you may need more money, you may need less money, but I don't necessarily think that money itself is the root of the unhappiness. It's that they have all of this money, but it's not aligned with who they really are. They don't have purpose. So the happiness comes from within. It's not the money. So I think you can find happiness through money when your money is aligned with your values and allows you to live the life that you're supposed to live, the authentic life. So what is the authentic life? I have grown to believe that we were all created for a purpose, that we were given unique gifts and talents that we're supposed to bring to the world. And that ends up coming through the work that we do most of the time, our careers, our jobs, hobbies, things of that sort. So to me, the authentic life is most simple. It's the life that your creator, whomever, whatever that might be, it does not matter to me. It was the life that you were created to live and bring to the world. And it's inside of us. If you do a deep dive and you get to connecting to your inner self, you will find out what that is. But as we go through life, there are signs and communications that are kind of directing you if you're open to it. And the one that I spoke about the most when I started going down this path was passions. I think that our passions maybe are supposed to be our career, maybe are supposed to be a hobby, they're supposed to be a part of our life, but also sometimes our passions lead us down a path that lead us to the thing that we're really supposed to do. So for example, I can only speak to my story because it's the only one I've experienced. I developed a passion for writing and creating content and podcasting. That passion maybe that's what I'm supposed to do, but that passion led me down this wandering path that led me to the idea and the personal experience of finding and living my authentic life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my purpose really is this idea of the authentic life and helping people find it and bring it to them. But my passion of content creation is what led me there. So I think passions are one way to find it. But what I've grown to learn, again, through my experience, is finding your authentic life. The cheat code that I believe is there is finding an alignment of your spirit, mind, and body. And I talk about the alignment of spirit, mind, body, and money because I do work in finance and money touches everything, as we talked about before. But I intentionally put money at the very end because I think when you align spirit, mind, and body, money falls into place. Going back to my hope of helping people find that freedom and aligning their dollars with their values, once you find the spirit, mind, body, then money kind of falls into place and you know how to use it. And also sometimes some magical things just take care of themselves. But the alignment of spirit, mind, and body is important to me because I think that the alignment of spirituality, however you practice that, I'm not going to be somebody, I don't live in a world of absolutes. So I don't think there's one way to be spiritual or connect to your higher power. Whatever you believe in, that's the belief system you need to be following. But that connection spiritually is your connection to your creator, which is going to be how you figure out what it is you're supposed to be doing, how to tap into those unique gifts and talents that make Bogomil, that nobody can do what you do better than you. There's gifts given to you. That comes through the creator. And I think that, again, passions are that way, and we think about passions in our heart. So I think our heart is our connection to the spiritual world, and we can listen to our hearts and follow those guides. So if we are able to connect and figure out who we are and what we're supposed to do, that's step one. Now, that version of ourself cannot become a reality if we don't believe in it. So the mind part of it is being in control of our mind, being in control of our thoughts because they're very, very powerful. I do believe our thoughts create our reality. A perception becomes our reality, and we have control over that. Many of us have given the rights to our brains to other people through social media, the content we consume. And also it just naturally happens without us even realizing it. The influences we have from our parents and from teachers and from society kind of begins to shape our thinking, and we're not always thinking for ourselves. So we know who we are because we've connected to our higher power and we've downloaded the information. We need our mind to believe it for it to become a reality. And we also need our mind to be strong and confident and optimistic because I do believe in like the law of attraction and energy. And if you're living in a world of negative thoughts, then negative things are going to come to you. If you're living in a world of positive thoughts, even in times of struggle or trauma, if you can digest that and process it and then get back to finding the silver lining, you're going to bring good things to you. It's why, luck always seems to happen to people. I think that they attracted and created themselves. So that's where mind comes in. Body comes in. Obviously, we are physical beings. I'm believing more and more we are spiritual beings in a physical body having an experience. But we need our body to be able to execute and carry out what it is we're supposed to be doing. So we need to take care of this one body that we get because we need to be able to do the things that we are supposed to be doing to make the world a better place. And then there's a kind of a second angle to body in that we need to also take care of our body because if our mind is really powerful and we need to stay positive and optimistic, if we're not feeling good, if our back is hurting or we're always ailing, then that's going to bring a negative feeling and negative energy to the way we're thinking, which will pull us out of alignment. And I know that there are a lot of people who take really good care of their bodies and health things happen. Like we can't control everything, but I think if we try to control as much as we can and take care of the body that we have, that keeps all that alignment. And when I have that alignment and when it's really dialed in, everything is very clear. My energy is very high and things just continue to move in the right direction. But I can see sometimes where maybe I don't do the things I need to do to maintain alignment and it starts to fall out and I can pick up on it and I'll bring it back in. So for me, finding my alignment of spirit, mind, and body involves meditating. It involves like journaling and writing and then working out. I like to lift weights. Like those are the things that if I get up every morning and do my meditation and do some breath work, I write my daily notes, which is usually the majority of my journaling. I go do yoga before I go see my clients. And then in the afternoon, I hit a weight workout in. If I do that, I'm like invincible. But there's not every day that I do that. I didn't meditate this morning. I didn't go to yoga. So like I didn't do those things. I don't immediately fall out of alignment, But if that trend of not doing those things continues, I notice either a feeling or just things start happening that aren't always the way I want them to. And then it's like, all right, back to doing those things to pull everything back in alignment. Now, what I do is not necessarily going to be right for you. I think everybody needs to find their own authentic way to pull those things into alignment. But I challenge you to find your way to do that and pull those things in alignment and tell me that life does not seem a little different. Your vision on life is not a little bit more optimistic, and things just seem to happen in your favor. I challenge you to do that and not have that experience.
I think we can all relate that we experience something like that at some point. And I think
that's why I love sharing it, is because I think sometimes we experience it and it's coincidence or it's chance, and we don't really notice it. So like, I want to share my stories. I want to share stories of my guests, because the more times somebody hears about these moments of synchronicities or these alignments that happen and what happens afterwards, it allows them, hopefully, to recognize it sooner. You and I can't, through our experiences, help somebody believe what we believe. They've got to experience it themselves. So by sharing the stories and showing it, hopefully that helps them recognize it sooner. And once they recognize and experience it, then the mind shift changes and they believe a little bit more and they go further and maybe make sure they're finding that alignment.
So many thoughts come to mind. So my first realization was that many of us, I think all of us, experience what you just described, that kind of feeling. But I think the trick is to have that feeling present in your life more often than not. It's not just acknowledging, oh, this was a wonderful hour or a wonderful day when everything just clicked. What I wanted to do, what happened, who I spoke to, the energy I felt. But having more and more of those moments allows us to get closer to, I think, where you're going with it. You talked about luck and luck being fortunate, however you want to call it. I think it's a fascinating concept. And somebody said, how to rearrange your life so you get luckier, and whether it's, working smarter or being in the right places, exposing yourself to the right people. Even hosting a podcast, I think, turns up a little bit the luck, content in your life, because people reach out to you. You and I are speaking because you and I decided to be a little bit more public with the work that we do. I told Chris Mayer, who's a wonderful person and a great investor, that it feels like sending a flare up to the sky. You don't know who's going to see it, whether it's a post or an episode or a conversation, whatever it is. But somebody somewhere will see it, read it, hear it. And fascinating things happen that you can call synchronicity, serendipity. And you can call it even magic. Sometimes it feels like this is borderline magic, the kind of things that can happen. But I wanted to ask you about pivot, an example of a pivot, because I felt like you were going with it in a certain direction that I'd love to explore more. How there must have been a time, and I don't know how much you want to share, where you felt like you're clearly not in alignment with that kind of feeling, calling. What happened? How did you figure out that's the case? And what did you do about it? If you can share one example.
Yeah, for sure. There's plenty of pivots that I've done, some major, some minor. So I think that's an important part of the pursuit. Like, this idea of pursuing your authentic life is not being afraid to pivot, because sometimes you have to go down a path to learn something new to be able to bring back to the path you were on for the next stop. So I want to answer the first part of it. In the past, in the moment, I never felt like I was not aligned. I don't think I realized, I didn't understand this idea of alignment and living an authentic life. Somebody asked me this the other day. I think that I have always been the authentic version of myself that I knew. So what I mean by that is, I think back to the firm I was at before I launched RLS Wealth. And I tell this story a lot, but there's a picture I show of me in a suit and my hair, and I'm like making this face where I'm obviously not happy. And I'm kind of making it to be silly. But if you were to talk to that version of me, I would have told you that I was happy. I was at a firm. Maybe not everything was perfect, but I was at a firm. My family was good. I was doing the things I enjoyed. And the version of like who I knew myself to be, I was being true to that.
Right.
But then when time goes on and I evolve, and now that I believe I am as authentic as I can be, I look back and I'm like, oh, that really was a force. And I wasn't really supposed to be there, because in this situation, I had been planning on launching my own firm. I met somebody who was looking for a succession plan. I pivoted away from starting my own firm to be this succession plan that obviously didn't work out, and no hard feelings in it. And then I pivoted back to starting my own firm.
Mm-hmm.
If I look back, I really knew that I was forcing myself into this situation. But the reason I forced into the succession plan was I thought it would get me further in my career faster. Meaning I'm going to inherit a business that has $100 million in assets. And at that time, me having a business of $100 million in assets was like, that'll never happen. Like, that's a huge number. And I still don't have that, but that's not my goals anymore. But nonetheless, I was like, oh, this is a good opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and take it. Versus that probably, if I had the awareness I have today, I would have known back then that was not authentic to who I was, and I wouldn't have done it. So I don't ever feel like I've ever been live a life that I felt unhappy. And I think part of that is because I have always followed my interests, and I've always done the things I've wanted to do, even if it's in small ways. So it's not like I have this discontentment because I'm not doing something that I want to do. If there's something I want to do, I'm going to try it. And I'm going to see what it's like to do. And I'll see if I need to do more of it, or if I need to come back and pivot and not do it. There's a story that I had a coach that I was working with kind of on brand building and infrastructure of content. And his pastor told it, and I'll do it really quickly. But basically the story is a father and son are driving through the desert, and they have their maps out, and they come to this fork in the road, and they don't know where to go, right or left. And they sit there and they pray about it, and they decide that after their prayer, they'll tell each other what they received, and they'll go with that. So they do their prayer and they get done, and they both say, hey, I think we're supposed to go right. So they go right, and they're traveling down, and it ends up being like a dead end. Mm-hmm. So they have to turn back, and they're going back, and they go back onto the left side, and they're driving down, starting to get late. The gases are getting a little low, and the son asks the father, like, why did God tell us to go down the right? And as they're kind of having this conversation, they start to see the lights ahead, the cities ahead. And the father's response was, sometimes God sends us down the wrong path to let us know that when we're on the right path, and we stay with it. Because what could have happened is they could have been on the right path, and because it was taking longer than they expected to get there, they could have turned around, go back on the right path, which is actually the wrong. They go right at the fork, which would have been the wrong path, and then they would have ran out of gas. They would have had no communication, and they would have been in trouble. But they know for a fact they're going down the correct path they're supposed to be on because they already went down the wrong one. So hopefully that story makes sense. That sometimes we have to experience or go down a path that's not right for us, so that when we get back to the right one, we know we're there on the right path and we stay with it. Because otherwise, things take longer than we want them to, and we begin to doubt, and sometimes we'll double back right before we get to that destination or we have that breakthrough that we seek. And so when you know you already went down the wrong path, it allows you to stay on the right path a little bit longer.
When I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of a certain lightness when it comes to the outcomes. So you took a certain path, you changed your mind, or the circumstances changed. You had to act differently. And then again, you ran into the end of the road, you changed your path, you went somewhere else. But I say lightness because I'm not picking up on regrets, on I wish I haven't done it, or I wish I did this. It's just, this was the path for the time being. I looked happy in that picture, otherwise you were probably making a funny face. I haven't seen the picture. I'd love to see it one day. And then
I'll send it to you so you can flash it in on the podcast.
But you kept going, and I can relate to that. When I was listening to you, and I think it's part of the experience that you start to see your own path, and you kind of realize a couple of pivotal moments in life, and how you end up where you end up. And I've been managing money for families for 20 years, having a blast with it, and I got to know incredible people on incredible journeys, people that have had wealth for many generations, and those that aspire to have that kind of wealth over many generations to come. It's been a great blessing, but it wasn't a straight line from here to there. I jokingly pick up those moments that I made into talks and speeches and articles where I find a moment where I feel like, had that not happened, would I be where I am? Mm-hmm. And I gave a TED talk about a book I picked up in Brussels, One Up on Wall Street. You might know the story, how it shaped me. It opened my eyes that this is something I could do. I find investing a fascinating intellectual, puzzle to solve. And then I ended up at a firm that was managing money for wealthy individuals, and I started to ask a bigger question: whose money I manage, which is something you were touching on, that any money you look and see has some sort of an emotional charge with it, and importance and meaning, right? So I can't imagine building a portfolio or allocating assets without knowing whose money you're managing. And I feel like that's not taught, that's not explained, and maybe it's not discussed enough, but you are taking a huge responsibility for somebody's lifetime of savings or a once-in-a-lifetime inheritance that they're not in a position to replicate. You have to know, you have to show a lot of understanding and empathy to understand where they're coming from, where they're going, and why this money is so important to them, and what is it that they intend for it. But I want to bring together the two topics we were talking about. One is the authentic life, and I'd love you to bring it to finances. How do the two connect? And I'll mention one or two things here to kind of set the stage. There are a lot of passions and pursuits that I notice in my life that will never lead, or I don't expect them to lead, to be financially rewarding. And I'm absolutely fine with it. And then there are other pursuits that either directly will lead to some financial rewards, or they surprise me that they could. But it's a beautiful nuanced dance between the two. Not every passion has to become a money-making project, right? Can you talk about how you think about the alignment between the two sides, the authentic life and the money dimension?
Yeah, and I agree with you. I don't think every passion necessarily has to be your profit center. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's very important for you to have a means to make money that you don't hate and you enjoy, but it affords you the ability to do the things you're more passionate about. Right. And I think that's where the authentic life kind of comes in, is it's up to you to figure out, where do your passions lie in your life? I think the only thing that could be universal is you need to have space for your passions. And then sometimes, like you said, the passion will grow to be something you never could have imagined. Example being my videographer and photographer, Morgan. I met her when I was doing my series of talks last fall. At the time, she was a social worker. Came to the first talk, and afterwards we were talking, and the message of the first talk was, are you living somebody else's life? Like, are you living the life you want, or are you following somebody else's story for you? And she said, you know what? I'm in social work because my mom was a social worker and my grandmother was a social worker. What I really want to do is photography. And fast forward to today, she's no longer a social worker, and her passion for photography has grown to be big enough to support her. And now she's building a business doing videos and photography, and she's doing a great job. So for her, she had this passion that she was doing that was able to grow to be something more. Some people don't want their passions to be their career because now it's no longer a passion. Again, you're only going to know that by experiencing and exploring what it's like to be that version of yourself. And I do that a lot. Like tomorrow I have my first class with a music producer to teach me how to make beats. Like, I love rap. I've grown up on hip hop. I thought I would outgrow it, but at 42, I'm still listening to rap every single day. And if I could be anything else, I would love to be a producer. So I've just decided I'm going to find out what it's like to be the producer version of myself and see if I'm any good. There is a timeline in the quantum field that I become the next big Dr. Dre producer. I don't know, and I'm not planning for that to be, but it is a possibility. But it only becomes a possibility if I try it. So it's something I'm interested in. I figured out to carve out some space in my life to be able to do it, and I'll see where it takes me. Most likely, it takes me down a path of being able to make the music for the background of my videos, and that's the extent of it, but I don't know. So I think that the way you bring the two together is, first off, finding that authentic life. And I think it's really important, something I didn't mention earlier, is the authentic life. I think sometimes when I talk about it, it sounds like a destination.
Right.
Pursuing my authentic life. It is not a destination. Your authentic life is an evolution, because as you pull that alignment and you're walking on that path of who you authentically are and living that life, you're going to have new experiences. You're going to meet new people. Your eyes are going to be open to new possibilities, which will take you down another path. For me, the producer path. So it is an evolution. And the only way you can figure out and bring those sides together is knowing who you are, knowing where you're supposed to be at this moment, and then continuing to follow your interests and your passions and see where they take you, not being afraid to pivot. Like, my regrets will never be that I spent time and energy trying to do something. My regrets would be that I didn't try to do those things that I wanted to, because what could have happened? What would it have been like? My regret is more on the not doing versus on the doing. And I think one of the things that I've realized, I've always known this. I didn't know that I know this, but what I realized is that even in a quote unquote failure, there's a lesson to be learned. There's something that I'm going to learn by trying this new thing, that even if it doesn't work out, I'm going to walk away with growth. And chances are what I learned is going to help me on the next thing that I try. I don't know what it will be, but it's going to help me. And I think going into those experiments, knowing that even if it doesn't work out, I'm going to grow and learn is a way to not go into it fearful of what might happen. So that I think the really only true failure in life is not learning a lesson from an experience. Because then you had this experience that you have nothing to show for it. But if I do this and my music sounds horrible, I know I learned something that's going to help me on the next thing. So at least I took away a lesson to help me become better. I may not have music, but I have something that has made me a better person and made me more knowledgeable.
I think it's brilliant, and I'm hearing a couple of things. One is a much more relaxed way of looking at your own identity. Like, who is Justin, right? If somebody was to ask, and I made an attempt at the beginning of our conversation, and I know it's not fair because probably the list should have, 100 items instead of 3. But the truth is that as time passes, we grow, we experiment, there will be different moments and phases in our life that we're very, very passionate about those 3 things at a time, and the other 2 things and new things. And I liked what you mentioned, that they can benefit from each other. And what popped in my head as I was listening to you, this episode will be over 100th by the time it airs. The 100th will be coming out this week as we're recording. So I'm blown away that I've done so many I didn't expect. And I mean, I'm very flattered that all the guests showed up, including you, and wanted to talk to me, and the audience follows. But in the process, I learned a lot of things, not just about podcasting and so many different things, but like a simple example, even organizing a system that allows me to be prepared, keep notes, keep dates, basically a well-oiled machine so that everything is ready when the time comes for the recording, for the production, for the release. I know that you know what it's like. It's not random, but the system I set up, and I'll share a secret with you, that I basically took that system and I deployed it to my investment research in many ways. And how I keep notes for the stocks that I follow, the holdings that we have, and all of that. And it's not exactly the same, but a lot that I learned about organizing 100 so episodes has taught me how to organize data, records, information, earnings releases, trading decisions, all of those things. And I built out a new system that organizes so much better whatever I had before in terms of my actual work, investment research and process, and portfolio management. So you never know where the inspiration for a particular tool will come from. And it doesn't have to, if I sat down and I said, Justin, I want to figure out a better way to manage my investment process, I don't know if I would have gotten to the place where I am had I not just opened my mind and learned from a different field and brought it back to that field. That's why sometimes I surprise myself where the inspiration comes from. But I like that aspect that you mentioned, that you can walk away with a lesson.
And you had way more fun learning. Like, how much more fun is it learning this through conversations with interesting people versus sitting in front of a notebook trying to map this thing out? Like, it was, you learned it faster and enjoyed yourself. And on top of that, have made amazing connections that who knows where that's going to take you in the future as well.
Somebody asked me if I write articles, I wrote books, I have the podcast, and I have my full-time job managing an investment firm and managing money for other people. And they said, like, if you had to choose. And I said, nobody's going to make me choose. Like, I don't have to choose. It's the beauty of it. And I feel like the three parts benefit from each other. A client asks a question that inspires an article that's on my mind, and I have somebody on the show who, call it synchronicity, serendipity, is very close to the topic that's been on my mind. And I bring it up and I say, either during the recorded part, or people might know that there's an not recorded part that happens after when we speak, where I bring up and say, Justin, I've been thinking about it. What do you think? And then in that moment, I bring it back to my day job and I have a new solution or a new perspective to something. Like the three coexist in my mind, in my day, in my week. I can't take any of them out anymore because it's a beautiful, flow of ideas. I want to pivot a little bit. I want to bring up something that you shared. I don't remember if it was Twitter or LinkedIn, but you talked about your visit to Walden Pond, the site of Thoreau's house. And I have some questions about it, but tell me about the experience of going there and being there. What was it like?
So I have to first be completely transparent and honest. I haven't even finished reading Walden. So I have had it for years. I've picked it up and I kind of read through it. But part of the reason I haven't read it is the version I have, the font is really small. And I have good eyes, but I just find it really annoying to read. So I can't read it very long. So I'm not a Thoreau expert. And it's by chance that I was even there. So I was out visiting an advisor that I work with, kind of helping him with life planning and business planning. And it happened to be in Concord. So they're like, oh, Walden Pond's just down there. So I know it. And I went there and visited it and walked to the site and sat there for 20 minutes, like kind of in a meditative state, but just sitting there because I just felt like the energy at that site would be really beneficial somehow to me. And I don't know what the benefit of visiting Walden was or will be, but for anybody who doesn't know, Thoreau went and spent, I think it's 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days. And I don't know if the 3 2s, like an angel number, were intentional or just happened that way. But he spent it out at the pond. He built the house that he was in. It's no longer there. And he spent his time there. And that's where he wrote Walden, where he talked about his thoughts on, politics and economy and life and nature. But as I read quotes, a lot of what he wrote aligns and resonates with me when it comes to this concept of the authentic life. Like I got a couple of quotes. So the world is a canvas for our imagination.
Mm-hmm.
I do think expressing ourselves creatively is a good help to find alignment and find our way. So, but when he wrote about going to Walden, he wrote, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. And I really like that because to me, pursuing your authentic life and finding that authentic life is really living. And going through life is different than living life. Like going through life is just kind of like, I'm on this path. I'm just doing this because I was told to do it. It's not bad, but it's not great. I don't feel excited and I kind of lack purpose. There's nothing wrong if that's the path that someone's on and they want to stay there. But I think more of us actually want to live life. So for me, it was a really cool experience to go because I know of Thoreau. I've read some of Walden. I love reading quotes of his. And to go where he sat and wrote that book that was aligned and parallel to some of my own thoughts, it was just a really cool, I'll say spiritual. There was nothing there that was like super spiritual, but it just was a really special experience. And the energy there, I can't explain. It's something you have to experience. So it was a really cool moment. And I just thought it was neat to sit at the footsteps of where he sat and wrote that book to try to channel some of his thoughts through me. Because this idea of the authentic life and the writing that I do and what I'm exploring right now, I know there are influences on me, but nobody planted this idea inside of me. It's things that I have come to realize and understand through my life. And while I think I'm a good person and I've had success building a firm, I'm a nobody. Who am I? And you have someone like Thoreau who was a great mind and wrote a good book, and I see my thoughts in his book as I read it for the first time. It wasn't like I read Thoreau and then came up with my idea. It's I have these ideas and I read Thoreau saying it, or I listen to people on other podcasts and they're saying the same things that I say. And instead of being mad that it's not me on that platform, it excites me that like, all right, I really am onto something. Like I'm not discovering something that never existed before, but what I'm discovering is real. Other people have found it, and I'm going to keep on pursuing it and sharing with people to help other people realize it as well. So to me, it was just it was a feeling of confirmation of keep doing what you're doing. Because it's by chance that I happened to be there and they told me about it. And I didn't go there with the intention of visiting Walden. I didn't even know that I was where Walden was. Like I didn't put it together. It just came up in conversation and I got to have that experience. Like I was supposed to be there for a reason that has not fully revealed itself other than I left more confident in the message that I am trying to share.
There's this quote from Goethe, the German writer from the late 17, early 1800s. He wrote that truly wise thoughts have been thought already thousands of times. But to make them truly ours, we must think them all over again, honestly, until they take root in our personal experience.
I want to pause for a second. I want everybody watching and listening to realize that there was no way you knew I was going to say these things.
No.
And your system that you created allowed you to pull that quote up so quickly. Like, that's awesome. Like, it's amazing that you were able to pull that quote up because you didn't know we were going to go down this path.
No. But
so I just want people to know how good of a host you are, like bringing attention to how good you are at what you do, to be able to do that.
Thank you. My trouble is that too many thoughts come and I can't always give credit. And I always feel like I should know who said it. It's a quote that I included in my book, Money, Life, Family, where I write about my experience managing money for wealthy individuals and all the study and research I've done on families throughout history that have succeeded keeping their wealth over time, which is more of a miracle than something obvious. And I had that quote at the beginning of the book because, and I don't know it by heart, I pulled it up as we were talking because a couple of reasons. One, Charles Candeval, who has a wonderful podcast, 1%, requoted that quote from my book in not long ago, and it's been on my mind. And when you said it, that you're hearing in other people's words your own thoughts, it made me think of that, because as I was writing that book, I didn't want to say, listen, I discovered something that nobody ever discovered before, because it's not the case. I'm trying, and I think you are doing that too, to take all of those best ideas, take them very, very seriously, and find a way to communicate them back to the world in a way that's maybe easier, more inviting to embrace. Because I don't think any of those truths are anything that nobody has ever thought of before. But we are given this chance to bring them back to life, and I think that's what you've been doing. That's what I'm trying to be doing. But truth be told, that as I told you at the beginning before we hit record, I have questions for you, but I don't know where this conversation will go. And that's what I love about podcasting, because it's so different. And if I was to write a profile about Justin, I can edit it, I can get your feedback, I can remove things, I can add things. But this is happening as we speak, so I never know where this will take us. Last time we spoke about a special book that I'll ask you about in a second, The Alchemist. But I just wanted to mention two words about Walden. I used to listen to his book on the subway in New York. And it's a busy environment. It's a noisy environment. There are a lot of people. And in that book, he writes how back in the 1800s, he wanted to get away from the noise of the city. And it wasn't the city that we have in mind when we think of the city with, trucks and buses and planes landing and, the subway making noises. It was a very different city. I think maybe a horse and a carriage was the loudest thing you could hear. Maybe a factory. But he wanted to get away from it. So I remember listening to it and thinking, maybe I do need a little bit of space from the city to hear my own. So that's why I found it very relatable that you brought him up. I'll stop talking in a second, but I wanted just to say, maybe you know that, but during COVID, my wife and I left New York and we stayed in a cabin in the woods in Pennsylvania. And I was rereading some of Walden at the time, and I was thinking, this is my Thoreau's moment when I have this cabin experience with incredible Wi-Fi, so I could continue to work. But I was able to hear my own thoughts. maybe for the first time in a very long time, and I grew to appreciate that. But that's my Walden moment. And if you want to share in a second, you can share. But I do want to ask you about The Alchemist, because it's a book that I hold dearly. I know it had a huge impact on you, and I do want to hear all about it, why it's important to you, and how did you discover it, why it's such a big part of your life.
Yeah, I don't have any Walden stories. I do know that a lot of people, Devin Martin, who was on your show,
Yes.
he spent time. A lot of people have very transformational moments out in nature, alone and away from everything. And I wonder, what could I learn if I had that? But I'm not going to take time away from my wife and 3 boys right now. So I might get a Walden moment like later in life, but I don't have any today. So The Alchemist, it is a special. I love the story of The Alchemist. I'll try to tell it quick so we can get more questions in before we run out of time. But the way I discovered the book, I think, is really cool. So I listened to a Kobe Bryant podcast a few years ago. It was before he passed away. And in it, he mentioned that The Alchemist was his favorite book. I'm like, well, if it's Kobe's favorite book, then I'm going to read it. So I order it, I get it, and I get like 3 or 4 pages in, and I put it down. It didn't excite me, and I'm not somebody who has to finish a book when I start it. I have a lot of unfinished books. So I put it down, and then you fast forward a few years, and as I'm going through my experience that led me to a spirit, mind, and body alignment and authentic life, I listened to a Jay Shetty podcast because I discovered Think Like a Monk, and it was aligned with kind of where I was going. And in the episode, he was interviewing Kobe Bryant. Kobe mentions The Alchemist again. I'm like, I know I have that book somewhere, so let me go find it. And I couldn't find it. So I order it on Amazon. It comes a day or 2 later, and I fly through that book. And the really cool thing about this story is that the interview that I watched with Jay Shetty was the same one that I watched of Kobe Bryant. And what I mean by that is it was the same interview both times. But what brought me to the first interview was I wanted to hear Kobe. What brought me to the second time was I wanted to hear Jay Shetty. So it's the same interview that twice brought the book to me at different stages of my life. And the first time I wasn't ready to read The Alchemist. The second time I was ready. And there's a cool moment in between those 2 episodes, or 2 viewings of that episode. There was an advisor I was talking to who asked me if I read The Alchemist. And I said, I have it, but I haven't read it. And he said, you remind me of Santiago. And I had no idea what that meant, but I took it as a compliment. And Santiago's the main character in the book, who's going on a pursuit of his personal legend. I won't ruin the book. So I thought it was really cool that, again, this book pops up and someone says it reminds me of Santiago, which then made sense when I read it. So the reason it's a special book is when I read it the second time, it was really at the beginning of my discovering of this idea of the authentic life. And I had thought of it and I had been trying to communicate it. And when they talk about finding your personal legend, like to me, I could swap out personal legend and put authentic life. It was very similar. And the story's a quick read. I did see myself as Santiago, going on this journey to find my personal legend, what I'm supposed to do. And it just, every time I read it, I discover something new that helps me in my own journey of either finding my authentic life or bringing the message to other people. So it's a book that I feel like is one of the books that when you read it, you'll read it when the time is right, and it will mean something different to everybody else. And one of the coolest things I think about it is when I read that book, I mentioned I see myself as Santiago, the boy going on this journey to find his purpose in life. But then there's the alchemist, who's another important character in the movie, in the book. And I also see myself as the alchemist. So without ruining the story, Santiago ends up meeting this alchemist, and it is the alchemist who helps Santiago find his personal legend, but he doesn't tell him where it's at. He helps Santiago find the answer within and through nature and things. So he guides him without telling him, here's your personal legend, here's what it is. He gives him the freedom to find it. So I am Santiago pursuing my authentic life, but I do also act as the alchemist, or I hope I act as the alchemist for my clients or people reading my daily notes or listening to the podcast, and that I am hopefully going to be able to help other people find their personal legend, their authentic life through my words and my content and help them find that. So, I mean, I might be able to see it depending how the edit goes, but there's a big painting I have on this wall that I had commissioned about the alchemist. So like I told the artist, all I care about in there is I want Santiago represented. I want the alchemist. I want the pyramids. the rest is up to you. And it's a really big, cool painting. And then I also recently got a tattoo, which you won't be able to see because my sleeve's a little too tight. But there is Santiago at the foot of the pyramids, and there's a passage from The Alchemist, which I think sums it all up for me. And the passage is, if a person is living out his personal legend, sub in authentic life, he knows everything he needs to know. There's only one thing that makes a dream impossible to achieve, the fear of failure. And so I have that, kind of tattooed on the script leading into the scene of Santiago at the pyramid. So it is a really important book. It's a book I love to give away. And I love to give it away because it's been so meaningful to me. And if you research it, a lot of people say it's their favorite book. Kobe, one of them, but a lot of people who are quote unquote successful or are living their authentic life come back and say The Alchemist was a very important book. Another example of somebody is there's a rapper named Russ that I'm a big fan of. He's an independent artist, like really successful, and he's done it all on his own. The Alchemist is a very important book for him. And I look at Russ, and he is living his authentic life. He's grown his fan base. He's grown his business. He owns all of his music, and he's done it his way that is authentic to him. And The Alchemist is a book to him. So it's a really, really special book for me. I highly recommend it. If you pick it up and you don't fall in love with it right away, pick it up a year later and just see if it hits you a little bit differently at that time.
It's a very empowering book, the way I read it. And I read it years ago. I don't know how long ago. And it's funny that you say that, but if there is a message for you, however you want to look at it, it will find its way to you. And if you're meant to read a book, you'll read that book. If not today, then tomorrow. My wife and I were in Richmond, Virginia. I was attending Markel's annual meeting. And as I was sitting in the meetings and seeing some friends, she went to a bookstore. And there are fewer and fewer of those. I love bookstores. I had so much fun.
I would love to own a bookstore. I would love to have a bookstore one day.
Right? That would be something. And meeting people that come to see the books and hang out. And she finds a book. It's an older copy. It's some anniversary edition of The Alchemist. And she brought it home. She bought it. And she says, you've been talking about that book years ago. And I haven't mentioned it in a while. But she bought that book and we both ended up reading it. I read it for the second or third time, and then she read it for the first time, and she absolutely loved it. And now the book is making rounds among our friends. And it just returned, I think, yesterday to our house. It probably will go on another trip because people are curious to read it. But it's a special book. It has its magic, and I don't know. And of course, I'm not going to give it away, but I feel like it's very inspiring that more is possible if you just listen to that voice that you've been talking about throughout this conversation. And if you're not ready for it today, keep that book, because it's like many other books, there might be a moment when you're more ready for it. Justin, I see you as a creator in so many different ways, and you share your work, your content in so many different ways. And I'm very curious what you've learned throughout this process, what you keep on learning. And what have been the best ways to get your message out there so far?
I'll tell you, I did not grow up as somebody who would have considered themselves creative. And I really did not discover the creator within me until I started my firm back in 2015 and launched a blog. And once I launched that blog and started writing, I quickly learned that I love doing this creative work. And the blog turned into a podcast, turned into videos, and like now I'm doing my version of spoken word poems. And I love expressing myself in creative ways and trying to find unique ways to bring my message out there. I used to be a financial advisor who was creative, but now I see myself similar to the way you do. I'm a creator who happens to be a life planner and financial advisor. It doesn't mean I don't love that work, but I think that I've talked about it before. I think I have unique gifts and talents that are the ones I'm supposed to be using the most, that pull me to the creative side, the communication, the writing, the podcasting, the speaking, because one of my gifts is I have found my energy to be contagious and inspiring to others. And not everybody has that. And I don't know why I do, but I do, and I need to embrace more of it. I have gifts and talents that make me a good financial advisor, but as I shared on a masterclass, as a financial advisor, I am replaceable. Maybe my clients would like the relationship aspect of it, they might not be able to replace one-to-one, but my technical skills as a financial advisor, you can plug anybody in and do that. And on the technical side, you can plug technology in to do that stuff. But when it comes to creating, communicating, the videos, the ideas that I have, nobody can do that as well as I can for the things I want to create. So I am a creator. What have I learned? I've learned that I learned that I need to have that as a part of my time to make me happy. And I've learned that I need to create because I want to create and not because it will help me grow my business. I'm fortunate that the writing on All About Your Benjamins and the podcast and those things helped me grow RLS Wealth, because the way I grew my RIA was content and referrals. So it helped me grow my business, but I've never created a piece of content solely for the purpose of trying to earn business. And I don't think that I can, because that's not authentic to me. That might be authentic to somebody else, but that's not the way that I create. So that's why I don't have a big audience, because I don't play the games. I'm not creating with, headlines or titles that are going to be clickbaity to get you to watch.
Right.
Like, I'm creating because I feel I have something in me that has to come out, and I have to share it. And here's how I have to share it. And I'm going to share it. And I don't know if anybody's going to read it or listen to it or watch it. And I don't care. I care a little. Like, I like to know that people are consuming it. But if no one is, I'm not going to stop, because I can't stop. And if one day it means that I have a huge audience, which I hope I do, because now I've found my message that I think I'm supposed to bring to the world. So I think today I'm better suited to have an audience grow than I was 5 years ago when I was finding my way. But I'm not going to stop creating if my podcast doesn't get more downloads. And I think that was an important thing for me to learn, was to create for the love of creating and let what happens, happens. And another thing I've learned is, you mentioned this before, is you never know what your words are going to mean to somebody else. And every once in a while, you get these cool moments of feedback from people that you never would have imagined. So a perfect example of this is, I was at Leo's soccer match this weekend, and one of his former coaches stopped me as I was walking in. It gives me goosebumps. He said, "Hey man, like I love the content you're putting out. I love the videos." And he said, "There was a poem that you put out." And my poems are not great by any means. But he said, "There's this poem that you put out, and it wasn't so much the message, but it was the bravery of you putting yourself out there and doing this that helped me get through the week." And I know that this gentleman's gone through a couple rough years. That's amazing. It's not even my words. It's just the action of me doing something that I love and putting myself out there when a lot of people would be afraid to, that inspired him to get through a crappy week. I'll take it. One person. Because I know, and you probably know this as well, for every one person that sends a kind email, there's multiples out there that just didn't hit send because they were too busy. Our words are being heard, and we are making an impact. But if you focus too much on that as a creator, I think that it's easy to get frustrated and give up. I mentioned, I hear my words on other podcasts, and I'm like, sometimes I'm like, that's what my thoughts. Like, I should be there. But that's not my motivation. My motivation is, I enjoy it. I know that it's making an impact on people's lives. I don't know how big of an impact. And my goal has never been to challenge Joe Rogan for the top podcast in the world. So as long as I'm enjoying it, and as long as every once in a while the universe lets me know that I'm impacting people in a positive way, then I'm going to keep on doing it. I do think that in the next year or two, I might be a little bit more intentional about distribution and trying to help my word find more people. But a genuine belief of mine is, if someone's meant to hear my words or read my words, just like The Alchemist, it's going to find them. It's just, how much do I want to try to speed that up? And I do think today that I want to speed that up, because the idea of helping people find their authentic life is what I want to do more of in my professional life. My days as a financial advisor are grandfathered. And what I mean by that is, me, the financial advisor, is grandfathered in for my existing clients. Going forward, I'm not a financial advisor. I want to do life planning. I want to do coaching alongside of that. And I want to create content to help people realize that there's a better life for them out there that they truly want, and it is possible. And there are ways to go figure out what that looks like and how to get there. and then put the advisor hat back on for a moment and help them connect money to it and see how you bring money to your authentic life.
There's so many thoughts that came to my mind, and I was trying to write some of them down as I'm listening to you. I wrote to myself that people will remember how you made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you're doing is you make them feel in a certain way. We started this conversation, you give them a peace of mind. The rest of it, what we talked about, you empower them in many different ways, but they will remember how you made them feel. The other thought that I had, when I'm thinking of the audience, and I do have to confess that at the beginning, I didn't even look if people are downloading the first few episodes. I was on a mission to have a handful, and the number was 6. Conversations with people that I respect, that matter to me, that I wanted to have an in-depth conversation about a variety of topics, and money was just an excuse to get talking, because we really talked about much deeper things and broader things. And then I started looking if people are listening, and I was increasingly surprised, because my podcast has no marketing budget, and it's all word of mouth, and whoever wants to share. I always encourage people to reach out to me and to share it with anybody in your life that would benefit from it. But it has grown, and get those emails that you mentioned when people write a long email and tell me how much of an impact this or that episode had on how they live, what kind of decisions they make. And somebody even wrote to me they feel like that I'm a part of their family now, because I'm in their household every week with the episode, and I get goosebumps, and it's precious to hear that, because I feel like it's true when you put it that way, that you spend quite a bit of time with me and my guest every week. It's a lot, and I appreciate it. I know, what, it's a choice that we get to do it, and you get to spend time with me, and I think it's wonderful that we have a medium that's so democratized that you and I can sit down and record. And I was looking the other day, 147 countries are listed among the listeners of my podcast. I can't even name that many countries in in one sitting. It's remarkable what technology can do for us. I do want to ask you about what you mentioned, which felt like building a long-term relationship. And I think that's what you've built with your clients. And I'm thinking of your audience. You said, it's not about the numbers, but I feel like you and I have built a certain relationship with our clients. On one hand, I see them as we're on a journey for life. It's a lifetime. And there's not an immediate sell. It's more of we'll get to know each other and work together for the long run. With the audience, I feel the same way. I feel like people join this journey and they will never leave. They're here to stay, and I appreciate it. But can you talk about that aspect? Because I see in you that you're all about building that kind of a long-term relationship with people, whichever way you connect with them. Am I onto something?
Yeah, that's part of what drew me to finance and being a financial advisor, was establishing and building relationships. So my clients, they're not clients anymore, they're family.
Mm-hmm.
I have numerous clients who have held my boys when they were babies, or knitted blankets, or it's meetings nowadays are very rarely anything about the financial plan or the investments. It's 95% life and catching up. And I enjoy it. That's what I enjoy the most of my job, is the relationship side of things. So building long-term relationships and with the content and the authentic life and building that out with the audience, again, the authentic life, it's an evolution. I'm never going to stop. Well, I never say never, because maybe I hit capacity on the authentic life. But where I sit today, I'm never going to stop creating about the authentic life, because it's going to continue to evolve. And the basis for a lot of my creation is just sharing my experience. I think that's one of the cool things. And I think that's what helps build the relationships is, yes, I'm interviewing people and sharing their stories, but also I'm creating content documenting my own journey in pursuit of my authentic life. So while I'm telling you pursue your passions, you're watching me pursue my passions. I'm doing exactly what I tell you to do. I'm making changes within my life to make it to where I'm living as authentically as possible and doing the things I feel like I'm supposed to do. So I'm not just telling you something and living a different life. I'm telling you to do exactly what I'm doing. And the reason I want to tell you that is because I am doing it and I know what it means to me and how good I feel and how good my life is. And I want that for you. So I think that genuine desire to help people find what I have comes across and builds that relationship. And I want to be there to help people. And I want to get more emails in the future of like, I started listening to you back in 2024 and I've done these things since, and I'm living my authentic life and things are so much greater because of the podcast or the daily notes or whatever it might be. My one word, like I had a mission statement I had to write years ago when I did like a meditation class and had to condense down to one word. And my one word is impact. And I know a lot of people like that's their one word, but I want to make a positive impact on everybody's life that I come across. Everybody from my clients to listeners of the podcast to the person checking me out at the grocery store. Like I want people, like I want, if I were to care about legacy, and I don't know if I do or I don't, but if I cared about legacy, I want people to say that he made a positive impact on my life. It'll be cool to look back and see my thumbprints all over the world in a variety of ways. Some of which might be somebody turned my podcast onto somebody else and that person pursued their authentic life. And I want to know that I made a difference in the lives of people, whether I know them or not. And that comes through the relationship because the way that I want to help people is a very personal, deep, emotional way, whether that's one-on-one or through the content, like to help somebody dig deep and figure out who they are and change the life they're living to one that feels more natural and authentic to who they are. Like that's not a surface level thing. And you don't get to do those things without having some sort of relationship. Financial planning, it's all built on trust. How do you build trust? Through a relationship. So it is very natural. I do enjoy relationships. And one of the things I'm not good at because I enjoy relationships so much is saying no. Like I'll talk to anybody. Like I have plenty of time and I've used a lot of my time to talk to people, and it's not, I just enjoy it. And it's been so good to me. It's why I can't leave Twitter. Like Twitter's a cesspool, but it's been so good to me. I am here with you and now know you because I met Matt Ziegler because of my content on Twitter. So while I don't really enjoy Twitter like it was back in the days, I can't leave it because I'm afraid of who I might miss out on getting an opportunity to meet just by being there a little bit. I just enjoy meeting people. You know, I enjoy what I get out of the conversations with others. You know, a lot of times I'm sure you have people reach out to you, want to pick your brain or talk to you. Like they seek the conversation with you, thinking that they're going to be the one getting the majority of the benefit of the conversation. But in those situations, I'm getting just as much out of it by talking to that person. And I don't know what it will be, but it's always a mutually beneficial thing. And I enjoy that. So I don't ever see myself being in a position where I'm not doing something that is trying to build relationships one way or another.
I think the way I look at it, everybody has a message for you. And I love talking to people just like you do. And my wife makes fun of me that, you know, when we're traveling, we hop in a taxi in a foreign country and 5 minutes into our ride, I'm having a deep conversation with the driver only because I asked a follow-up question to how are you?
Well, go back to making impact. Like how many people get into the cab and totally ignore that human being in the front seat as if they're nobody? So not every cabbie wants to talk because they're so used to people ignoring them, but to be seen, it's the same thing as going through the checkout line at a grocery store. Everybody has a name tag on. Thank you, Diane. Say that person's name and see them light up because you saw them. So I'm the same way. I've had some amazing conversations and experiences just by talking to a cab driver. Sorry to steal your story. I got to share this one. So I did a video a few years ago. I flew into New York, took a cab instead of an Uber. A young kid who had just come over from somewhere in North Africa. We have awesome conversation on the way to the hotel. I asked him if he would pick me up the next day to take me back. And that night I get this idea of like, I want to have that conversation again and I want to document it. So I made this little mini documentary of him and I talking and him telling a story of coming over. I had this awesome conversation, created a piece of content. Roman and I were in New York a few weeks ago. I text him. I said, hey, I'm going to be in New York. You know, I would love to catch up. And I was hoping he wasn't still driving, and he's driving for Uber now. but he took us to the airport and I got to reconnect with him, all because a few years ago, I asked questions and took a genuine interest in somebody I had no idea that I'd ever meet. And it was really cool. So yes, I totally get what you're saying as far as being somebody who is interested in everybody that they meet, because we know everybody has a story.
Mm-hmm.
Whether there's a lesson to be learned or it is just letting somebody tell their story, I think that's a really cool thing that we have the opportunity to do with people.
It's so inspiring, and I'm glad you shared it. And I feel like it's just being curious and caring about the answer. Because sometimes we ask a question, but we don't really care. But if you actually care about the answer, some really cool things can happen. And you never know why that person appeared in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a completely random conversation that will even remind you of something. And you'll go home and call a friend you haven't thought of in a year or two. You don't know. Mm-hmm. And I'm always very open to it. I feel like it's this moment of potentiality, optionality that I just don't know. So why wouldn't I say hello? And the other point I wanted to bring up, you said with your clients and the conversations you're having, I manage money, I run portfolios, I pick stocks. But then last week, Friday, I'm taking a call from a client that I really enjoy talking to. And I realized that we were talking for an hour. And out of that 1 hour, I think 5 minutes, we were talking about the actual portfolio. But the rest of the conversation is about what I would call life. And because we have that conversation, I feel like I can be better about the 5 minutes because I have a context. So you're making that decision. Oh, you will have this kind of a need. Oh, this has changed. Oh, this is evolving. Without that, if you told me just manage the portfolio, I just don't know where to get started. Sure, I can find stocks that I believe are, well priced and worth holding and so on. But I need the context, and the context comes from all those conversations that you mentioned. And we have to have room, time, and space for those conversations. I'm very grateful that I'm able to arrange my life. So if somebody wants to hop on the phone, a client wants to talk for an hour about something, I always tell them, just let me know and I'll make time and we'll talk about it, because I know that that conversation is very, very important to them. And sometimes it's a 5-minute conversation. They just wanted to run something by you. And you feel like that 5 minutes means, $1 million to them because they really needed that 5 minutes. And there was nobody they could think of, which is a huge compliment when you think about it, that they could think of that they want to hop on the phone to talk about this one thing for 5 minutes. Find those 5 minutes. That would be my answer. I think they're precious. I want to ask you about Rick Rubin. And I think many people have read his writing and know who he is. And I'm sure you're going to tell us more. But you want to be the Rick Rubin of the finance community. What would be your dream role to make that happen for the next decade or two?
I don't know if there's a dream role, but when I say that, and I always caveat that would be like, I've never wanted to be the somebody of something, but if I would, it'd be the Rick Rubin of finance. And the reason I say that is when I think about going back to what I want to provide as a value is providing that freedom to find in who you are and to live the life you're supposed to. The way that Rick Rubin does that as a music producer is the way that I want to do it in finance. And the way that he does it is, even though he's a producer, he's very humble, but he's not super musical. Like, he doesn't work the boards. He doesn't work the mixer, which is what traditionally a producer does. What Rick does is he provides an environment for the artist to come with him and helps the artist find the hit within them. So he asks them questions, gives them ideas, and he doesn't write the song. He helps them find it within in a way that nobody else can do it. No other producer does that way. And then he has this ability to add one suggestion or one little detail that makes the song go next level. So he has a talent for knowing the right suggestion to make a song even better after the artist has found it. So if I think about myself as a life planner, I want to help my clients or people consuming the content. I want to help them find their own authentic life themselves. I don't want to tell them what their life is. I want to provide the environment and the questions and the guidance for them to find it themselves. And then once they find it themselves, help them kind of figure out how to bring that to reality. So that's like, I don't necessarily want to walk around barefoot in a white tee and have a big beard, But what I want to do is kind of be this person that brings a different approach to helping people. Like I think Rick, even though he may not say it's spiritual, I think his approach is more spiritual. And we don't talk a lot of spirituality and money, and like woo and money don't go together. Like I want to bring woo to money because I think that there is a connection there. Mm-hmm. And when I think about Rick and the way he does it, like that's what I want to do. So I don't know if it is, at another firm doing it or what the actual role is. I just want to be somebody in finance that if there's something deep inside of you that you can't get to, that I might be the person who can help you find that and then help you bring that to be a reality through the way that I do things unique to me. So that's what I mean about being Rick. Rick is not spreadsheets and e-money and right capital and all the data stuff. He's more of the philosophical and emotional, and like that's where I think my strength is, which is why going forward, with the exception of my clients, I don't see myself doing a lot of new financial planning number stuff for new people. It's more of the emotional, spiritual, philosophical, help you find your way. And then if you need money to be addressed, I'll connect you to a financial advisor I know, because I have a community of advisors that I co-founded, and I know hundreds and thousands of great advisors. I can help you find somebody to do the numbers. I want to be somebody that not very many people can do what I do and help people the way that I can. And my way won't be right for everybody. Like not everybody's going to want to go the direction I go with a financially related person. And that's okay. But some people will. Like I would love to have manifestation be a part of someone's plan, or talk about the law of attraction and how we need to change our mindset to allow money to flow to us. Like I believe those things to be true. And if I believe them to be true and you believe them to be true, then why shouldn't we incorporate that into your overall life plan and have that spill into your financial plan?
I think it's brilliant, and I can really relate to it because I'm a numbers guy, and I always like math and precision. And over the last 20 years working with people with substantial wealth, I realized that there's an emotional, psychological, maybe even metaphysical aspect to it, however you want to describe it, but it's way beyond anything you can see in a spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. And it's very important, and you have to acknowledge it. And I think it's going to take you to a whole different dimension professionally and just in understanding of what's really happening. And it comes up in all kinds of conversations, but I had a career decision to make at some point. And I was talking to somebody that I have huge respect for, who is a very private person, and he manages money still for other people closer to retirement. And we're having this conversation, and honestly, Justin, I thought he's going to run the numbers with me and talk to me about like the technical and the scientific side of what I do. And he says, Bogumil, at the end of the day, ask yourself, how does it feel? Mm-hmm. And he caught me so off guard, Justin, because I thought many people would tell me that maybe, but not him. And I have such huge respect for the experience that he has had and what he's done for so many wonderful families. And I thought he is asking me how I feel. And it's a question I want to ask people more often. We've looked at the numbers, we've looked at the situation, but how do you feel? I think we both can find a lot more color and nuance and understanding in that question than going over numbers one more time. And if you tell me that this portfolio allows you to sleep well at night, you talk about peace of mind at the beginning, we're onto something. And if it doesn't, let's redraw it. Let's find another way. Let's find a different selection to think about. I do want to ask you about your definition of success. I won't let you run away from it, but I do want to ask you a question that's very important to me. I read and I listened to a lot of your content, and I also listened to your interview with Matt Ziegler, our mutual friend. And you brought up something there that moved me, and you shared that every event has a lesson for us. Can you take us back to that revelation moment and lesson there? What was it like? What is it like? And how come every event has a lesson for us?
That's one of those podcast moments that like a light bulb went off as we were talking about things. So that episode was about whether or not you have to go through a traumatic event to kind of find yourself. And it was really cool because the way Matt does it, he pairs you up with somebody who you don't know that he thinks you should know that's on the other side. So Adam Broderly was on the side of, he was in Tower 2 of 9/11, obviously a very traumatic event that changed the trajectory of his life because of that experience. And I was on the side of where I don't have a lot of trauma that I would highlight that's equivalent to that, but yet I have kind of found myself. And so we were talking about things, and a couple of life events came up that were traumas. They didn't happen to me, but in them, I learned important lessons. So both of them revolved around the death of a friend. And I'll share one of them, and you can listen to the episode to hear the other one. But kid that I played, Chaz is his name, kid I played basketball with, he's a couple years older, kind of took me under his wing when I was going to be a freshman in high school, and looked after me. He graduates, I graduate, we don't see each other for years, and I find out that he was shot and killed defending his girlfriend, the mother of his child. So obviously that was devastating, and I remember breaking down in the car when I heard that, and I hadn't seen him for years. And then I find out when his funeral is. And the funeral happens to be the date of a meeting I had with a woman that she was supposed to roll new dollars over to me. So it was a business meeting where I stood to make money and work towards my goal. And I ultimately did not cancel the meeting, which I should have. And I missed Chaz's funeral. And then at the end of the meeting, I didn't even get the business. And so the lesson of that I took from that, and this is not why, he did not die to teach me this lesson, but in this moment, in this experience, what shaped me and I learned was I will never put business above another human being. I will never miss a funeral. I will never miss an event for my kids or supporting somebody because of a business meeting, because the business meeting is not important. And it sucks that is the event, and I missed the opportunity to be at that funeral to learn that lesson, but that's the lesson that I learned. And I feel like going back to the regret, I don't have regrets of not doing something, because I'm going to learn something in that. There's always something to take away if you're open and willing to receive it. And I think that sometimes life is bringing us lessons constantly, and sometimes we don't pay attention and listen. So it has to get a little bit louder and a little bit louder. And the way that it gets louder is it's more severe and more traumatic until you finally learn that lesson. So I do think that I've done a lot of reading about after we die and what our souls do and different beliefs. But some of the books I've read have said that our soul's purpose in life is to learn for future experiences back down on earth or wherever we might go, which is kind of interesting because I grew up Catholic. So that's not what I grew up believing. Mm-hmm. But if that is to be true, then if we're down here occupying our bodies to learn on this experience, then there's lessons to be learned all the time, and we need to be receptive to it. So I do think there's a lesson in everything. It's up to us to find it, but it's there if we're willing to look for it. If there's a really important lesson and we're not listening, the universe is going to get louder and louder until you're forced to finally realize it. So I would encourage you to be more receptive so you can hear that message sooner and avoid having something really bad happen to you. And I feel bad saying that because it's not like people who have bad things happen to them are wanting it. And I don't think that they deserve it. But I do think that might be why some of those things happen that way, is that you need to learn this lesson and you're not listening. So I'm going to raise my voice and make it obvious to you that this is the lesson you need to learn.
I like that approach of, instead of judging this is good or this is bad, and some of the things are, unthinkable that happen to people, but looking at it as, what can I learn from this? I think it's much more empowering because the choice, the decision comes back to you. Mm-hmm. It did happen. And what are you going to do about it now? I think it's much more empowering than wasting so much thought and energy. And I think we need to go from some sort of emotional cycle after a big, bad event. But eventually we do want to ask, what can I learn from it? And how can I use it? In that spirit, Justin, tell me about your definition of success. How do you think about it?
Man, this is such a hard question because there's so many ways I could answer it. But as I sit here today, August 28th, 2024, the definition of success for me is maintaining being true to myself. And that might seem like a little bit of a cop-out because I'm all about the authentic life, but I think that if I can maintain being true to myself, then everything else will fall into place. I'll be a great dad. I'll be a great husband. I'll be a great financial advisor. I'll help people find their authentic life by staying true to myself, because I believe that the answers that we all seek and the direction that we seek all lie within us. It's already all in there. We just have to go find it. And the best way to find that is by being authentic and being true to yourself, because that goes back to my belief that then you're doing what it is we were created to do, and that will be your guidance, and that will help you do the things you want to do. So, long-winded answer, but my definition of success today is being true to myself because of the impact it has on everything else.
I like the sound of that, and I do have to ask a follow-up question. Do you think that that self that you have in mind is the process of discovery who that self could be, should be? Or is it an evolving target in a way? Because the self, the way I hear it, continues to change. What you thought was, complete and it when you were 22, it's different today. I wonder if it's layers of an onion that you're getting to the core of, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing.
It's a great question. And my first response that pops into my head, which I will trust, is that's a combination. That it starts out as peeling back the layers of the onion, and then you get to the authentic version, the true version of yourself at that time. And if you can stay with that, then it becomes an evolution. So a lot of us, again, going back to the influences and the systems of schooling and different things in society, we find ourselves with a lot of layers of onion to peel back because we aren't really who we want to be. And not everybody realizes that, but others do. And as you begin to pull back and get closer, eventually you get to the center, and now you found who you are and who you're supposed to be. And in that moment, there is a version. But then once you start being that version of yourself, as you experience and grow, you will evolve and you will become new things, which is why I moved from financial advisor to life planner. And I sit here today, I can't imagine doing anything other than life planning type work. But in 5 or 10 years, the life planner may have evolved into something else. So that's an awesome question because I've never thought about that before. But that's my first thought. It's both. Depends on where you are in your own journey.
I'd like to imagine that there's some sort of a core that if we ask enough questions, spend enough time, we're going to get closer and closer to that ultimate core. Like, this is it. And all the other layers had a role. Like, they all played a role in shaping us and getting us closer to it. But there is a middle somewhere in there. So let's keep looking. Justin, this was incredible. Thank you so much. I mean, we covered so much ground, and I highly recommend all the work that you do. I'll include it in the notes so people can find you and learn more about what you do. And I really appreciate your generosity, kindness, and how vulnerable you've been with me for that hour or so, talking about things that some of them are, very intimate. And I think people got to see the Justin that I got to know a little bit over the conversations we've had before.
The pleasure was all mine. I have been looking forward to this conversation since we talked. And I'm not going to lie, when we talked the first time, I hoped that was like the pre-interview to see, am I worthy enough to come on your show? This was an amazing conversation. And going back to the compliment I gave you before, the reason I was so excited is because I know how good of a host you are, and the questions that you ask get the best out of your guests. And it's really exciting to be on the other side of the microphone and have somebody ask you great questions that allow you to come up with new ideas and share things that you don't always get to share. So it was a pleasure to be on, but I am eternally grateful that you asked me to come on. It was everything I hope to be and more. I hope that it inspires and impacts some people that are listening.
I have no doubt. But back to your point, I think there are many ways to communicate with people. The podcast creates this incredible space for an hour or so that I have not been able to replicate outside. I feel like the attention, the presence, the time, and I feel like I have a permission to ask certain questions that if I asked them over coffee, I think that would have been maybe too much or too deep or too far or too soon. But here, I take the liberty and I say, will you indulge me? Because I know that I'm maybe crossing the line or pushing the line a little bit, but I love when my guests let me go places because I think I'm giving the audience a chance to get to know somebody in a way that I think will make them, relate to them more. And I love messages from friends of the guests that send to me. They write to me after and they say, this is the Justin I know. You got Justin exactly the way I know him, over a beer or, whatever, hanging out. And I feel like that's the beauty of it, that creating that kind of space for a little bit of time. Justin, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it.
Bogomil, thank you.
You were listening to Talking Billions. We talk about big ideas, big inspirations, big topics. We take on the hardest subject of all, money. But our conversations lead us to an even bigger question: what it means to live a rich life beyond money. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment and follow, subscribe, rate, and share with friends and family. We rely on word of mouth to promote the show. One click for you means the world to us. Thank you. Until next time, your host, Bogomil Baranowski.